the question I have for you is a little bit for myself. I've had a front row seat to your leadership style. I love it. I do. We've talked about it a lot. And,
Mhm.
since since I've seen it for a while, you know, I just love the things that stand out, your charisma, your passion about technology. It really motivates people. Outside looking in, I kind of see that. But I wanted to hear from your point of view and, let the viewers understand a little bit like what do you do? What's your secret sauce to your leadership style? How do you connect with your organization, your engineers, your peers as leaders? I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I learned that two key things came pretty early on in my career. Um, Hit your majors, don't switch your minors. I heard that a lot.
Yeah,
That was kind of a strategy that, for whatever reason, it gravitated to me.
yeah,
I found if I have few key major points to hit on to achieve,
hmm,
and everything else kind of falls into place. Same thing with technology. You have to stay up to date on it. You have to be relevant on it. It's not, it's not a race you kind of sit down and just watch. You have to actively engage on it. And in order to motivate other people, they can tell kind of whether you're really engaged on it or you're just managing. There's a difference in that.
yeah,
For me, it's constant education. Like I said, I watch very little television.
yeah,
I didn't grow up on it as a kid, so
yeah,
I'm odd. I don't have that gene. Like
yeah,
everyone grew up watching cartoons and doing things. I didn't really do that, so I've never had that big desire in my life.
yeah,
Oddly sad. One of the only few shows. There's been a couple of series I've gotten into and things like that. There
yeah,
haven't been many,
yeah,
but YouTube is pretty much my go-to. So I sit and watch latest strategies. I watch a lot of the Neil Ford and the architecture series. I
yeah,
watch the Gen AI series. Whatever the topic is, I tend to binge it for weeks on end to
yeah,
kind of fully understand it from various perspectives. And that allows me to take it back to people. Everything I bring back to try to teach and
yeah,
work with others on, I want to have an understanding so I can have at least a good conversation. I don't want it to be a one-sided conversation. I want to be able to ask relevant questions and engage with my peers, with my associates to get them engaged as well. And I think it's that bilateral feedback of being able to actually have the conversation as a leader.
yeah,
Most of the time, you don't expect a leader to be relevant, right? You expect it to be a manager. You expect them to be okay. Yeah, they were good 10 years ago, but we don't expect them to be good today. Clearly, they did something to get in their position, but that was 10 years ago. They're
yeah,
just the manager now.
yeah,
We're these mysterious monsters that yeah, our calendars are always full, but we really don't do anything at all except come in and like mark the orders.
yeah. Get the budget and leave us
Yeah,
alone.
that's what it is. We're about the budget and the money and all the negative stuff. So they don't really
Yeah,
see, they don't get to see that challenge of, okay, let me teach you something. So the
yeah,
minute you can come in, that was one of the most inspiring things here at Home Depot to have is when Savannah's going, you're the only manager that's ever done that. You're the only one that's actually taught me something.
yeah, yeah.
That's eye opening. And that's the difference is when you start showing that you're investing in their future, they'll begin investing in their future.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because, technology is one of those fields where you constantly have, you talked about growth mindset at the beginning. Always have to learn something, right? And that's one of the fields where I feel like this is one of the fields where you have to constantly do that. You have to learn something new. It's like, I remember when I first graduated from college, everyone was like, Java is the cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like Java felt like COBOL for me. When I first graduated, no one wants to do Java anymore. Everyone wants to do the next cool language, whatever it
Yeah.
is. Right?
Everyone's into Python now over Java.
Yeah,
Everyone in Georgia Tech, all the
yeah,
kids growing up,
yeah,
it's all you're learning on Python. Java is a legacy language now.
yeah, yeah. And I can understand why. I mean, that there's just a lot of kind of ceremony or heaviness with Java that you have to, whereas Python
Yeah.
is much more kind of straightforward and direct. And
Yeah.
you know, I my kid takes a programming class in the weekend and he's learning it in Python. And I love the fact that, he's doing it in Python because it's such a simplistic language where you can get all the basic concepts of programming across. So, I love that aspect about Python. But going back to your main point, it's just that the growth mindset, I think, is a really key thing to surviving in the technology industry, whether you're an individual contributor writing code, or you're a manager or a VP or a director, or or a CTO, CIO type. You have to be constantly learning new things. And the other thing I think you mentioned that really resonates, you talked about that authenticity of passion. Your
Mhm.
passion is in technology is deep. You can choose to watch Netflix with your wife, but in the evenings you're watching YouTube videos about,
Yeah.
again, core patterns, or
Mhm.
quantum computing and whatnot. I still
Yep.
find it hilarious that you rather do that, but I
But
just
we're
love
in
that.
opposite rooms. She's actually watching The Sopranos right now. She's finishing the whole Sopranos series. So she'll be in there in the other room watching The Sopranos, and I'll be in the bedroom with the other TV watching my series because it bores her to death.
Yeah,
But it's what I enjoy, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I think that's a big part of it, and I love the part where you're like, uh, for lack of a better description, the social justice about whatever I learn, I give it back to the people, and I what I really admire about you at a certain level is that I've seen that happen over an extended period of time. Everything you've were interested in, you've shared with me, you've shared with your peers, you've shared with your team, and then you take it quite seriously. You actually follow through with it. And I've sat in on so many of your innovation times and lunch and learns, and I love that aspect about you. And I continue to learn as much as I can from you, not only just the topic itself, but just the passion and the structure, the simplicity of the structure in which you kind of disseminate this information. So I love
Yeah.
that about you. It all kind of leads to kind of one thing that I've also really appreciated about you is I find you are a very innovative dude. You kind of your mind kind of is built that way. Um, you know, Talk to me about how that kind of comes to you. Is that natural for you, or is it very organic, or is this something you work on?
No, it's been me. I've been a very odd character my entire life. I've never really been
Okay.
normal. I don't think like other people. Even as a young age, I don't know, growing up, I was very inquisitive, but I was also really intelligent. I was an honor student growing up. I was mints at an early age.
Okay.
I did. I've never made a B in school. Like it was straight A's the entire time. That kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Honors.
Yeah.
College was a rude awakening because it was the first time I'd really been challenged.
You actually
I
work
grew up.
hard.
I grew up in a little country area. There was
Yeah.
300 kids in my school. It wasn't exactly a tough criteria they're grading on a curve.
Yeah.
Um, so that was been kind of the challenge. Like it's always been weird to me,
Uh-huh.
but I've also had a fascination by it. So I've just kind of gravitated to it. But I think because I grew up without a lot of guidance and influence in how to do things in life. My wife laughs. I was raised by wolves. Is kind of the answer. Is what it was like.
Okay.
My parents were away. They weren't home a lot. I was very much that single mother household kind of growing up
Yeah.
where my
Yeah.
mom was working all the time and I was raising myself, or occasionally I'd have like stepbrothers or something like that there, that
Yeah.
kind of thing household. It was very independent. So my way of thinking, for me to be different, has never bothered me. I just kind of jump off the cliff. It's one of those things. It's an intelligent jump, but I've never had that fear of what others thought because people have never really thought of me as this really cool guy or anything. Like I've never had that title, so
Yeah.
I've never tried to be cool. I tried to be cool when I got into my 30s. I never tried to be cool at a young age because I just knew it wasn't happening. It was unachievable.
Yeah.
It wasn't until actually like I went through my midlife crisis in my 30s that I actually was like, oh yeah, I can be the cool guy in the room. I
Yeah.
can afford to do that. That
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
So
You got the money and you've grown into
I
yourself, and
I
you know
did.
who
I had the
you are.
sports car, the
Yeah.
money, and everything
Yeah.
else. I knew how to talk to people. I had the confidence.
Yeah.
All those things I didn't have as a child.
Yeah.
As a younger growing up.
Yeah.
All those things I got somewhere after 30 in life.
It's just interesting listening to you talk to this because like I said, our backgrounds are very, very different, but one thing I hear in common that resonated with me immediately was the fact that we were left to our own devices and to figure stuff out. So
Yeah.
much like you, I had my parents gave me a lot of independence. Well, as much as a bunch of, Chinese tiger parents can, but I was given a lot of independence to figure some stuff out myself. Um, And that's one thing I struggle with as a dad is like, how do I, you know, let
Give them,
go the reins for my kids? So, but that was one thing that resonated with me and what you said. Kind of taking that, you're an innovative guy, you know, how do you, you figure that out for yourself, but how did you, radiate that out to the rest of your team? How did you imprint your culture of innovation into the rest of the organization? How did that work for you? What was
repetition.
your strategy?
It's really it's like any other app. When you work in software, I tell everyone on my team, you're an athlete, whether you want to be or not. It's no different.
Mm-hmm.
If you can be the best starting pitcher in baseball, right, or the best center in basketball, that the kind of thing. But if you don't train, you're not going to be the best very long, right? You're going to become a couch potato and you're going to sit down.
That's a great analogy.
Well, IT is no different. Everything changes around us. It's competition all the time. The technology is changing, promotions. It's a fast moving field. 2 years is a lifetime in technology. Things will completely change out from under you in 2 years if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm showing people. And what I do is by keeping up with it, the lunch and learns, the activities I do, the constant engagement. It's almost like a marketing term. It's like guerrilla marketing.
Yeah.
If you want something to happen, you've got to do that guerrilla marketing. You've got to constant contact,
Yeah.
you got to constantly reinforce it,
Yeah.
but you can't force it. You have to make it optional, right? But eventually people start showing up and then more people start showing up and it kind of propagates. It's like planting a garden. At first it looks barren, then it'll be full of some weeds, but
Yeah.
eventually you're going to have some fruits for your labor there coming out of that garden. That's the same thing. This is what I'm seeing now. The Gen AI piece, I'm seeing team members who are on the side chats doing work to get this done
Yeah.
without me engaging on them. They want to do it. They want to be motivated by it. They have an actual interest in it, and for good reasons. It's the evolution of their career. When
Yeah.
I do these things, everything I'm doing makes their resume look better, their life. I'm investing in them. It's not the company investing in them. It's not them investing in them. It is me personally taking my time to invest my knowledge in someone else so they can have a greater understanding of the world around them or their career, their job, their options. So
Yeah.
trying to find relevant things to engage people, that's really what it is. And over time, they realize, hey, you know what? You really are investing in me. I've learned something.
Yeah.
Many, many, many people have came back to me, telling me, thanking me for what they've learned. And that's really the value in it. That's how you know it's working. When people come back and say, hey, I actually learned something from that. Thank you.
Yeah. And like,
That's all it takes. That's that little simple knowledge. I don't need a big ceremony. I just need to know that it's working, and that lets me know it's working.
yeah, I mean that's the thing that I want the audience and viewers to know is like I've seen this firsthand. You follow through on it. So many luncheons and learns that you ran for to make sure that you're basically developing that muscle memory for your organization to want to do the same thing automatically.
Yeah.
And after such a long period of time of doing it, it's taken off. These guys are like your team is like, hey man, just one more thing before we call it a day at 6 p.m. on a
Yeah.
Friday evening. That's
Yeah.
unbelievable. That we can have you have developed that kind of passion for innovation within your team in that way. It's you got to get
It's
your hands dirty. You got to get grassroots, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a bit of a social technique. That's the a little bit of a carrot dangled there because how
Yeah.
else those last 3 to 4 hours. 4 Hour Friday was started because half a day on Friday is usually water cooler goof off time in offices.
Yeah.
We're talking about what we're doing on the weekend, so they learned if you put your innovation time for the last 4 hours of a Friday and make it somewhat engaging, people leave the water cooler and start trying to engage on something purposeful and a little bit better. Is it perfect? No. But if you're going to do skunk works, if you're going to do things that are risky, if you're going to do things that are probably not fruitful, it's better to do it in wasted time anyway. It makes sense. You're at least getting a chance of getting something out of it.
Yep. So, the last thing you kind of talked about was, that water cooler moment, on a Friday and everything. And in this day and age, you know, we live in a post-pandemic world. Uh, a lot of companies have gone back to the office. The return to office policies are in place, but for us, there are a lot of people still in this world where, they're still working remotely. So interested to hear your point of view is like you did all this innovation stuff. You've changed the culture of the organization all in a remote world. Wanted to get your thoughts because you've done it in both.
Mhm.
To get your thoughts and what's the difference of doing it in a normal office environment versus doing it in a remote environment? What did you have to change? Um, how did you have to kind of rethink things a little bit?
Working in normal office, it was actually harder. I've worked remote and semi in the office, 3 days a week, kind of hybrid setups.
Mhm.
The um, the remote gives me more opportunity, more possibilities because of the scheduling. My biggest challenge was finding scheduling time in the office. I found it more creative. That's why I always do things at lunch, because I would do a 30-minute lunch and learn session about a technology topic where we would watch a video together. But a
Yeah,
lot of times it was, since it was a smaller teams, it would be people gathered around my desk just watching it. That
yeah,
kind of, or we'd pick a meeting room, I'd go put it on there. When we all have our own desks in one place and we're not having to shuffle to meeting rooms and doing the shuffle to where the equipment isn't working and things like that, it's a lot easier. I also can schedule things back to back and set them up in there. I found when I was in the office setting, to build rapport with people, I used to play, there's a little game called Munchkin. It's a D&D game.
okay,
I would do a 30-minute Munchkin run at United Technologies, working with people there. Uh,
okay,
I completely stole that idea from one of my leaders there and loved it. Like, because they would do a Munchkin. It wasn't a super serious session,
uh-huh,
but it was a way to connect with people. And the technology conversations we would have while playing that game was amazing because you could talk about relevant topics. Back then, it was semantic versioning and webhooks and HTML5. You know, those were the big topics of the day.
yeah,
But we had numerous discussions about them. Pipeline builds. That's where I learned to build my first pipelines. Was over Munchkin. We had Team City. Team City pipelines back then that we were building for United Technologies. So I learned from the DevOps engineers back before DevOps was a term how to build type while playing Munchkin. We were just talked about it. It was conversations we had. Some of my best topics, we would go to the gym after work and it would just be kind of discussions while we're working out about technology from like-minded individuals and things like that.
yeah,
A lot of that hit, in that point in my age where it was, because we were on site, we had to be creative about how we talked about things and had innovation.
yeah,
Um, it wasn't quite as easy as Slack because when I got up and walked to someone's desk, I distracted them. Today, where we have Slack, I can wait 30 seconds and read that Slack at my own leisure. I'm
yeah,
not immediately turning around in my cube to get distracted and stop what I'm doing to focus a conversation with someone.
yeah,
So the asynchronous nature of remote communication
yeah,
makes life a lot easier. It's much harder. I just, the other week when we were in the office, for our work session, I noticed I ran out of room on a whiteboard. I haven't had that problem in quite a while.
yeah,
Miro boards and Lucid, I don't run out of room. It's infinite space. I just
yeah,
present the screen, I drag wherever I need to go around on the screen. So
yeah.
I actually find it much harder getting things done in an office setting because of the physical nature of it,
The
right?
physical limitations,
Yes, there's
all that
physical
stuff.
limitations.
Yeah,
I actually have to go to the next meeting. I actually have to walk
yeah,
down the hallway, catch an elevator, go to the next floor, go wherever to get to a meeting room.
yeah,
I have to configure the equipment and set it up in the meeting room because it's very seldom left in a a good shape for the next person. That kind of thing. Half the time it doesn't work. The camera doesn't work. The
yeah.
consistency I get from the home office is far better than the inconsistency that I get from corporate offices.
And the interesting thing I'm hearing from you is, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, the data is there. I've seen you do this, and I've done it myself. But it, I bet you, like most people, hearing you say this probably feels like, oh my God, he's just being contrarian here. But it's not. It's not. It really, you are so much more effective. I mean, just simply to your point, it's easier to click on a Slack huddle to get someone's attention than it is
Yes.
to go walk down whatever hallway it is to find somebody
Yeah.
and try to have to find a meeting room that's available for them for us to
A
talk through.
breakout room or a little corner session. Yeah,
Yeah,
the physical challenges of building is the problem.
yeah,
It's that
yeah,
kind of to it. When you take those physical dimensions out, I grew up on the internet. I grew up learning programming in a remote setting
Yeah.
using BDS games from a guy named Scott Martins, who ended up going and being the head of Sony Denver.
Yeah.
I learned in a remote setting how to handle basic logic and programming in a
Yeah.
three-dimensional. It's not truly, it's a two-dimensional text-based world representing a three-dimensional object-oriented space.
Yeah.
And that was, I learned object oriented programming by programming objects in that space. So it made sense to me. When I wrote, my first script I ever wrote was a fishing script, right?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
literally the players would pick up a fishing rod, have a worm item and bait it on there, and they would
Yeah.
do an RNG and cast, and they had to be near an area of water, and you do all these checks. But that was object oriented programming, to where I was programming the properties of objects, but these were objects also that existed in the game world. So it made like that connection, that learning really clicked with me. That's why it wasn't a challenge. So
Yeah.
I honestly, I started in a remote world. So I think maybe that helped a little bit. It just felt natural to me in the way I grew up. I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't grow up in a very physical world like most people because I was isolated.
I can kind of understand where you're coming from. I mean, I will say that I probably didn't have as easy as a time of you adapting, but I certainly going remote during the pandemic wasn't as hard for me that most people are saying. There's a lot of things like I hear from, my friends and they're like, oh, I don't know how to, you know, keep an eye on what my, teams are doing. And I'm just like, that's
You
not
don't you
you.
don't keep an eye on what they're doing. You keep an eye
Exactly.
on their output. Are they producing? I don't care what they're doing as long as they're producing. That's the difference.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're like, think about what you do at the desk. How often, when you're in the office, do you goof off? How often are you just talking to people? Just
Yeah.
because you're having that's natural.
Yeah.
So you're killing probably 30% of your day in just conversations alone in
Yeah.
natural social behavior,
Yeah. And not
right?
to mention the commute back and forth and the
Oh,
work
yeah.
you have to do to get to that, right? So
Yeah.
it's just, it's just one of those things where, I agree with you. It's just a little bit, easier to manage through all of that. Um, So, moving on a little bit, you said earlier something about understanding people and what that kind of, about leadership and knowing where they come from. And what that kind of clicked back to me is something you said in the past where, you did you had learned about psychology or you did some sort of study around it.
Yeah, I had one of the girls I was dating was going when I first started dating her. She had entered her master's on psychology,
Yeah.
and we were like living together there. And throughout her master's, I was her study buddy in psychology. That's where I learned Myers
See.
Briggs, and
Yeah.
we
So,
learned about dark psychology, some of the lighter MBTI psychology, all the various types of how people operate, which was weird because I had never really. I'm not an emotional guy in that
yeah,
kind of sense. I'm very kind of dry in my
yeah,
personality.
yeah,
But this was the first time I'd seen the science of psychology applied as to why people do what they do. And oddly enough, it made sense because you can classify people in categories and we fit very well into them. And we've done this for centuries.
yeah,
We've done this through was it astrology, the various signs,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's just a classification of genetics based on someone being born within a certain period of a calendar,
yeah,
that kind of thing. There's an odd time based aspects around that I look at as to how genealogy happens in genetics
yeah,
conception, to where if you want randomness, the one thing I learned about programming randomness into gaming,
yeah,
there's only one controller for RNG, and that's time. The point in time at which the number is generated. That is the true unique thing that makes uniqueness unique, is the point in time.
yeah.
The same thing applies to genealogy. That's how astrology works the way it is. You can classify people because it's really just a time classification based on genetics.
So when you've learned all this from your ex-girlfriend and whatnot, how do you think this aspect has helped you in terms of your leadership skills? Does reading people actually help
It,
you? Is that something?
yes, yes. It's tremendous because before then, if you'd have met me before that, I
Yeah,
was very cocky and egotistical. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was always right. I thought my problem was I would get frustrated with people, and I would be like, "Why are these people dumb? Why are these people like that? Why can't they understand what I understand?"
well,
I didn't understand the differences in people. That was what I did not understand.
yeah,
Right. The differences in individuals and people is really, it took me a while to classify. When I started classifying people and saw what motivated people, what made people think,
Hmm.
some people are, they like praise, affirmation.
Yeah.
Some individuals like monetary gain, they want material things. Other individuals like notoriety. I learned from myself, I am very much a praise and recognition. I like to do a good job. I like that good boy, good job kind of mentality of
Yeah.
myself. When
Okay.
I don't get that, I'm less likely to do good things, right?
Yeah.
I've learned that about my own personality.
Yeah.
I wear tight black t-shirts because I have a spectrum of Asperger's, which makes me enjoy tight clothing for whatever reason. I feel comforted by it.
Okay.
Things I learned about myself in
Yeah.
understanding the way the science behind psychology works. There really is a reason and a science behind why we do what we do. And
Yeah.
when you start studying it, you learn more about yourself than you could ever imagine. All of the weird quirks, all of the reasons I do the things I do
Yeah.
have made sense in the repetition of it. It's all survival techniques. It all goes back to, it's that nature versus nurture impact. But
Yeah.
when you look at the nature and the nurture and you know all of how your life played out and you try to quantify and classify it, you go start going, oh yeah, this is why I acted this way. This is why I left home at an early age. This is why I did these things. This is why I'm so independent. That classification matters. And when you get into things like Myers-Briggs, which is the thing that really I find the most fascinating, is the classifications of it.
Yep.
Um, that as a leader, if I know someone's an ENTJ, I understand that they're going to be motivated by a more assertive personality.
Yep.
They're not going to be motivated by emotional pleas and empathetic pleas. They need a more direct approach to go, hey, here's how we're doing this. They want a leader that's strong.
Yep.
Whereas a more empathetic person, on that side you're going to need a little bit softer touch. You're going to need a little bit more coaxing in the way you approach the problem or the challenge with an individual. So
Yeah.
it's allowed me to tailor my response to an individual's personality, and I get better results that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm not saying that, I know anything about psychology, but I know where you're going in terms of the ability to empathize and read people is essential to leadership. You have to sometimes, to your point, stroke their ego sometimes. Sometimes you have to understand and empathize with whatever they're struggling with. But at the end of the day, it just has to all kind of come together in that way and come off as authentic about it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is awesome, man.